Story 1. AITA for doing a half-assed job taking family pictures at a wedding after being told to shut up and stop being a smartass? I was taking pictures at a family wedding as a favor. I was being paid about half of what I normally charge, and I was fine with it. The bride is my favorite cousin, and her husband is amazing. During the formals, the wedding party was great, and I got lots of great shots. When it came time to take pictures of different family groups with the couple, people were assholes. They wouldn't stop talking or looking away from the camera. I tried politely reminding everyone that the camera was the big black thing on the tripod and that it took still images, not video. I was repeatedly told to shut up and stop being a smartass and that they knew what a camera was. I asked my wife to record video of the responses for me. My cousin was delighted with the pictures from the ceremony, the formals, and the reception. She laughed her ass off at the family pictures. And about half of them, people are looking off in all directions instead of at the camera. In most of those, there are also people with their mouths open. She thought they were hilarious, and her husband agreed. I started getting shit on social media from my family about the terrible pictures. I replied that I had tried to explain to them that the camera was the big black thing on the tripod and that it only took still pictures. They said I should have waited for them to be ready. So I started posting the short video clips of people being jackasses towards me. My mom said that I went too far and that they won't ask me to take pictures for them again. I did a fake cry and said boo-hoo. She called me a smart aleck. Please let me state that I do not think I am the asshole in this situation. But many people do. They are upset because they don't often dress up and get together and they didn't get good pictures. Story 2. AITA for not attending my best friend's wedding? My friend, 27/F, asked me, 28/F, to be one of her bridesmaids for her wedding. She was my maid of honor 2 years ago, and before that, we'd always say we'd be each other's maid of honor. We've been friends for 20 years. When she asked me to be a bridesmaid, it stung a bit, to be honest, but seeing as she has a twin sister that she is close to, it made sense that she should be her maid of honor. The issue I really had with this is that at one point, before I did barely anything as a bridesmaid, she told me, "You don't have to stand with the other bridesmaids during the wedding." I found it weird that she was saying that, but I replied, "No, I want to be there with all of you." After a bit of back and forth, she admitted she doesn't want me standing there with everyone because of my fear of being the center of attention and my social anxiety. She was worried that I would have a panic attack just like I did standing there at my own wedding. Honestly, it was bad during my wedding because I was shaking and couldn't breathe, and everyone's terrified reaction made it even worse for me. I had to leave and come back to just me, my husband, and my mother to continue our vows and such while everyone else moved on to the reception. I couldn't even go join them until I was drunk enough to not feel embarrassed. I've been to therapy since then and have made huge progress regarding my social anxiety, and my best friend knows this. I felt hurt that she didn't trust me enough to let me stand with the others. I told her I was so much calmer and less anxious now, and I won't even be the center of attention like I was when I was the bride. She said she acknowledged my improvement, but just doesn't want to take chances. She said she doesn't want to embarrass me again and that she would just feel worried about me the whole time, and was also worried that I would ruin the mood of the wedding if I did happen to have a panic attack. I eventually told her that I'd just rather be a guest if I can't do all the bridesmaid stuff. On the day of her wedding, I was just so sick to my stomach with hurt and sadness that I was merely going as a guest to her wedding that I just decided not to go because I felt so left out. Now she is very mad at me for making her feel bad at her wedding. She thinks I was trying to hurt her and make her feel guilty because of what she thinks was a reasonable request. I didn't mean to hurt her, but I just couldn't go because I was overwhelmed with hurt. The people I've talked to are all divided on who is the asshole in this situation. I feel bad for ruining her mood on her wedding day, but I still feel what she asked of me was hurtful. AITA in this situation? Story 3. AITA for telling my wife I'm not okay with her naming our daughter with her sister instead of me? My wife, 26F, is pregnant with our first child. She did a test to determine the sex of the baby early in her pregnancy, first trimester, and we found out we were going to be parents to a little girl. Really quickly, we decided our daughter was going to be named Adora. The name holds special meaning to us. She was always a huge fan of Shira and loved the OG show and the remake. We actually bonded over the remake show. I, 27M, thought it was a sweet name and loved that it had a deeper personal connection for the two of us. The middle name was still not entirely set in stone, but the first name was. My wife is now 6 months pregnant and her twin sister is expecting a baby boy 3 months after our daughter is due. 3 weeks ago they started talking about baby names, and all of a sudden my wife told me that she and her sister decided the babies should have timeless names that fit with their family names: Emily and Elizabeth, James and Haley, their parents, William, Hannah and Grace, their siblings. So my wife and her sister chose the name Catherine for our daughter instead, and Sil's son will be Alexander. I was hurt and more than a little peeved. My wife asked me why I had that expression on my face, and I told her I was not okay with her naming our daughter with her sister instead of me. I told her we had chosen the name Adora. She never expressed second thoughts about the name. We were just working on a middle name. I told her I was supposed to be the baby's other parent, not her sister, yet she takes her sister's opinion on board and decides they'll name the child we're having together. I told her I had not expected that from her. That I thought she truly respected me and was excited to be on this journey together. She asked me if I was really that upset about it, and I said yes. I told her I wouldn't lie and say I was okay with it. I told her she basically cut me out of the process in the end if she were to go ahead with this. My wife has been quiet since this. Her sister was furious with me for telling my wife I wasn't okay with it. She told me I should respect their twinness and I got to make all other decisions with my wife, so why was I being such an asshole about this? She told me to get over myself, and then she accused me of acting like a child. AITA? Story 4. AITA for not having my wife buried next to her long-deceased husband as my stepson desired? My wife died 3 months ago suddenly after 9 years of marriage. I was in charge of her funeral arrangements. We had one daughter together, F8, and her 2 kids from her previous marriage, M16 and F14, that I adopted. I had discussed her burial spot with my stepchildren and told them I wanted her buried in my family plot where I intend to be buried one day. My stepson said she would have wanted to be buried next to his biological father and her previous husband, who died 12 years ago. My stepdaughter said she didn't care either way. I didn't want to disagree with my stepson on something like this, so I looked into the cemetery where her previous husband was buried, but found out there's only one adjoining plot next to his grave, and no plot adjoining the adjoining plot, meaning that I can't be buried there one day. I told this to my stepson, that I can't bear to not one day be laid to rest beside her. I know she loved her previous husband deeply, but she loved me as well. And I've only ever loved her and only ever will. He didn't agree and said she had always hoped to be reunited with her previous husband. We were at complete loggerheads over this, but in the end it was my call and I made it. He was so upset with me and still is. He earlier said he needed time to get past this and now says he needs me to apologize. My stepdaughter thinks we shouldn't be having this fight because it doesn't matter what happens to anyone's body once they die. I want to apologize to him, but I don't think I'll mean it. Even now I think it would have pained my heart so much if I'd listened to him. Story 5. AITA for refusing to allow cousin-in-law and his family to move in when they are about to be homeless? My husband's cousin Chris and his wife Rachel have 3 kids, 13, 5, 3, and we've hung out twice since our daughter, 7.5, was born. We're not close. Rachel's always been rude to me. Before my husband met me, Rachel had a thing for him and tried to date him. He never reciprocated, and then when we became official, Rachel started dating Chris. Chris called asking if they can move in with us as they're homeless. Chris and Rachel missed rent payments and got evicted and have been couch surfing with their 3 kids for the past month or so. My husband said he would need to talk to me first. My immediate response was no. Husband agreed, although he felt bad. Chris's family had been giving them money to make their rent payments, and instead of paying rent, they used the money for other things. Chris works odd construction jobs and doesn't make much. Rachel claims she can't work because of ADHD. Chris called back, husband apologized, and said we don't have the space. Chris tried to say we have 5 bedrooms. My husband clarifies that we don't, we have 4, one of which is my office. Chris says he's disappointed and he would have helped us. My husband says I WFH and need the house to be quiet. Chris says he doesn't understand where we get the impression that their kids can't be quiet and he's offended. Rachel says we have the money and a big house to help, but that we would rather see 3 kids end up on the streets because I'm greedy. I snap and tell her that her kids are not my responsibility and I'm not comfortable sharing my home with strangers. It's not our problem that they mismanaged their finances and that maybe she shouldn't have gotten her nails done every week and paid their rent instead. She responded that I don't understand how hard they have it because I'm privileged and providing for 3 kids isn't cheap, so I said maybe she should get a job and stop using ADHD as an excuse, and they should have thought of that before having kids, and hung up. Husband's phone starts blowing up with calls from family members. He picks up Chris's dad's, Paul, call. Paul wants to know why we're unwilling to help. I ask him why he and his wife haven't opened their home, as this is his son and grandkids after all. He says Chris/Rachel and the kids stayed for a week, but their house is too small and it didn't work out. I told him that we aren't close to Chris/Rachel and have no obligation to them, and I suggested he and his wife reopen their home to their son and grandkids. He says they did open their home and now it's our turn. I laughed and hung up. So now my husband's family thinks that we're cruel and heartless. We also haven't disclosed that I'm pregnant, which is also a big reason. They're anti-vax and I don't want to be exposed, and I'll be going on mat leave for a year as of January, so we're trying to save up. So AITA? Story 6. AITA for telling my dad he's not allowed to give his speech at my wedding? My fiancé and I, both 20s, are getting married in a month, and there's a dispute with my dad now, and he claims I'm being unfair, but I wanted to get some thoughts on it. So Dad decided he was going to give a speech at the wedding without saying anything first. He had shared the contents of said speech with his sister, my aunt, and she knew the speech would not sit well with me and mentioned his plan to me. So in this speech he already wrote he talks a lot about how his wife is the love of his life, how amazing she is, etc. It's very similar to the speech he gave at their vow renewal 10 years ago. He hasn't shied away from expressing in front of me and to me that he never loved anyone like he loved his wife, how all his past relationships pale in comparison. And that includes my mom, who was his first wife, who left him widowed with an 8-year-old son at the time. To make it even more difficult to hear, the vow renewal was held on my 18th birthday, and I got to celebrate my birthday by hearing Dad talk about how Mom meant nothing because his second wife was so much better. They were married 8 years at the time. But a lot of family and friends didn't attend their actual wedding, and they decided they'd basically have a second one to celebrate, and they decided my birthday was the perfect time to do this. Anyway, the speech he wrote for my wedding had a lot of this content from what my aunt heard from my dad and read herself. She knew on my wedding day the last thing I needed to hear was how much he adores his wife when he does so in a way that basically said my mom meant nothing to him. I told him I knew about the speech and he didn't have permission to give the speech at my wedding. Dad asked why not, and I told him I didn't want him to use my wedding to praise his wife. He said she means the world to us, so why would I say that? I told him she means the world to him. But she pales in comparison to my mom, who meant the world to me and still does. I told him he might have decided Mom meant nothing, but that didn't mean I shared his feelings. He accused me of being sensitive and then said it seemed like I didn't care about his wife at all, and then he said she was a good mom to me for the 8 years she raised me. I told him she was never anything more than his wife. My mom died when I was 8 and I didn't get a new one. And the last thing I need to hear is how little she meant on my wedding day. Dad told me to be reasonable, and the parents of the bride and groom typically say something. I told him nothing he had to say had a place at my wedding. That this is mine and my fiancé's wedding, not his. I told him to get married again if all he wants to do is praise his wife. But it was not happening at mine. He told me to stop acting like a little boy and grow up. I left. Then his wife called crying about the fight Dad and I had, which led to Dad calling me again and telling me to grow up again. AITA? Story 7. AITA for telling my sister that just because she's a social worker it doesn't mean she always knows what's best for foster kids. My sister, 30s, is a social worker. My husband and I, 30s, are foster parents. We are currently long-term foster parents, and possibly foster to adopt, for biological siblings. The siblings lost their sole parent a couple of years ago. They have half-siblings from said parent who are much older, now adults to be exact. Our foster kids miss their half-siblings and have craved a relationship with them. But the half-siblings have chosen not to have contact, and from the limited info we know about our foster kids' lives before they came to live with us, any visits that were had while the half-siblings were minors, it had to be forced on the older kids who did not wish to keep contact. This has been extremely difficult for our foster children, and we have advocated for them to be in therapy, which luckily was approved, and they go once a week. But they often ask about and bring up their half-siblings and beg for us to set up time for them to see them. My sister is aware of this and has spoken out to my husband and myself 3 different times about how we need to do more to ensure this relationship between siblings. We have told her that's not possible. She told us we are failing our foster kids. She said we need to find out the info of these half-siblings and fight for contact. She told us we could bring it to court if we need to. I reminded her that's not something we can do. She told me the kids will never see us as parents or want to be in our family if we keep them from their siblings. And then she went on and about how important sibling relationships are and brought up the fact she's a social worker and she knows how these things work better than anyone in the family. I told her that just because she's a social worker it doesn't mean she always knows what's best for foster kids. I told her she also has no control over adult decisions that are made, which is something she should know as a social worker. She told me I should take her professional advice and stop invalidating her profession and experience like I did just there. AITA? Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Basic Spoon on YouTube for more daily Reddit content.